Grumble, grumble. Hey everyone, it's the Grumpy Meeple, and I'm coming back at you with some more DiceFest related content. This time I thought I would kind of share my overall impressions of DiceFest 2023 in the form of going through a bunch of pictures that I took, basically. So I'm hoping that I'll go through this, it'll jar my memory, and give me fun anecdotes to share, basically. So let's get to it. So this is a picture of them setting up the kind of main hall. This is where the panel that they held was hosted, and the rock concert and the pub trivia, which I won, proving once again that you never, ever challenged a Grumpy Meeple at anything, but apparently pub trivia in particular, because I destroyed everyone who faced me, which is my way. And so this was Thursday afternoon, basically. And so they had a lot of work to do between here and Friday morning to get this bad boy rolling, which they must have been up, like all night. So kudos to them for getting it set up. Here's your big Flying Frog Productions DiceFest banner in the main hall. This is an incredible recreation of the living statue from Forbidden Fortress. I mean, it was huge. I would have loved this. This would be like an amazing, how you can buy like sideshow collectibles and get these like 1/4 or 1/6 full size figures of like Luke Skywalker, or maquettes of like the Hulk fighting the Hulkbuster or whatever. That's what this gigantic thing reminded me of, and man, I would be real tempted to pay $1,000 for something like this if it were ever put on sale, because it was really cool. Here you've got the trophies for the various contests, which were just really cool looking. You can see they're the Crimson Hand, basically, and the Three-Eyed Skull. I don't know what this was doing there other than as a display piece, but it's another one of those things like, oh my god, it's so cool, and it's just cool to see on hand. Here's me very excited in front of the flashback spotlight poster for Space Hulk, which I still did not get to play, and I have never played, but they have a giant 3D version of Space Hulk at DiceFest. You can see it over here. Here are the Terminators still in the box. And I was hoping to get to play it, but maybe next year. But I love 40K lore, and so I was excited to get a picture next to this poster of the Space Marines and whatnot, the Gene Stealers from Space Hulk. This was the kind of display piece for the Gathering of Heroes social hour, which was a fan meetup that Brian Bosch facilitated, and Jason and Scott Hill were there along with a bunch of attendees of the conference. So it was okay. I didn't get to talk to Jason or Scott really much at all during the convention, beyond like I played a game with Jason, and I did get to chat with him a little bit about design decisions that they were making for the Impossible Hell Train that I thought were cool, or asking him like, are you doing this because of this, and to hear his thoughts on it were really cool. And Scott I ran into a couple times, but it's a little cliquey. Like, they were definitely like hanging out with their 10 friends that have been coming forever, or who possibly aren't even fans, but just like volunteers and stuff that they're kind of used to socializing with. But these maybe aren't the most social people in the world to begin with, so a bunch of board game nerds. So, and I did get to hang out with Brian Bosch. He did from the Flying Frog, the unofficial fan group on Facebook. Brian Bosch is kind of like one of the perennial posters and the organizer of this event and others, and he did fulfill a bucket list item of mine by immediately recognizing me from the channel and then giving me shit for being so vitriolic with my feedback. which ended up being really fun because we had a fun conversation, and he was perfectly kind about it. But we ended up having a fun conversation about critique and about the kinds of things that I critique versus the kinds of things that most of their fans bitch about. You'll notice I don't make videos about how they don't update the Kickstarter often enough. I don't make videos about how their shipments are delayed. I make videos about strategic decisions that I think they are screwing up that would increase their fan base, basically, that would spread the game if they were to try looking at things a little bit differently. Those are the kinds of things I critique. And so, and he got it, and he understood that because of that, it's fair to say that my critiques are always well-intentioned. I don't just shit on them to shit on them. There's a purpose behind it, and the purpose is to try and, drive change, basically. And so that was really fun getting to hang out. And just having somebody call me out for it was something I was worried about the whole lead up to the event. Not worried about it, because, I will whoop anybody's ass who fucks with me. But looking forward to, and to have it actually happen was really cool. Here's the line for the store opening on Friday morning. It was very long, and while we were waiting in the line, they were handing out the scavenger hunt cards. So the scavenger hunt's a fun thing that they do every year, where they basically just hide these little questions around the convention. To be something like, name an enemy group from Shadows of Brimstone or something like that. And they hide them behind water coolers or behind banners or in kind of hard to reach places. And so you spend the whole convention trying to track them down because you get a couple promo cards for doing so. And it was really fun this year because it was much harder, I felt like, this year than last year. And also, they ended up having you take the results of the scavenger hunt and feed them into a Mad Lib kind of a little Mad Lib that ends up kind of telling a story about your scavenger hunt card, and so that was fun too. Here's a piece of exclusive artwork that I purchased. So every year they have a certain set of unique art from production art from the game. So it's basically the art that was drawn for a particular card called the Oni Skull, and then scanned and put onto the card, the associated card. And I had been eyeballing these last year. It's like when I go to this convention in particular, there's only so much stuff I can buy, reasonably. I own 85% of everything that's ever been released for Shadows of Brimstone, basically, and I have literally dozens and dozens of boxes coming with these Kickstarters. And so I don't really go there and try to fill the gaps of my enemy pack collection. At this point, I'm kind of not worried if I have every single one, and I don't buy generally resin miniatures, and they have a lot of that stuff there. And so I wanted to pick something up as a souvenir, and this just jumped out at me as the perfect thing, basically. So it's a really, really cool piece of art that I'm going to frame along with a bunch of other DiceFest stuff. And my goal is every year when I go to this thing, I'm going to pick up a new piece of art. I'm going to create a new little diorama, a framed diorama, basically, as a chronicle of my Brimstone DiceFest adventures. So very cool. And this is one of a kind. This is the piece of art that was drawn for that card, and it doesn't exist anywhere else, essentially. And it's signed, and it has a certificate of authenticity, and so very, very cool. Oh, and the other fun story about this was Scott Hill happened to see me buying it, and he talked to me a little bit about the art and where it comes from and whatnot, and what's so special about it. And then he kind of mentioned that he often remembers the people who buy the art, and so he would refer to me as Oni Skull for probably the rest of my life, which was funny. Here's some shots of the kind of, I don't know what to call these, preview or prototype miniatures for the Impossible Hell Train. And as we go through this, there are shots from both new sets that are coming. And I mean, even at this level of zoom, you can see like these are amazingly detailed. These rider miniatures are the coolest mounted miniatures I've ever seen. I don't have Zombicide Undead or Alive, so I can't really compare them to those, but they're freaking awesome. And like these undead are just so cool. Like look at the evil spirits kind of coming out of their mouths and the detail on their clothing and the trunks that they're carrying around. This guy's top hat. All the miniatures were top notch. These guys, I cannot quite remember the name of them, but they were terrifying during gameplay to the point where, like, on the spot, Jason Hill was like noting, yeah, these guys might be too hard because they had an ability that every time they had terror 2 on their enemy card, which means every character on the board it takes 2 horror hits doing X amount of damage. And whenever, and I think it was just 1 sanity damage, but whenever somebody took damage from that, they all healed that many points in health. So, you know, you're taking every round, everyone is taking 6 horror hits, and any damage that gets taken is being fed back to these guys in health, and so they were functionally unkillable. And so they Jason kind of noted that. He's like, yeah, this might be too much, and he was talking about how they had been really weak early on and were getting stomped, and then they updated them with the Terror 2 rule, and how that had strengthened them, but maybe it was too much because they were literally unkillable. You know, they just did too much damage. Their health was insane. It was like 15 points or something like that. They had decent defense, and they were just constantly healing all the damage that you were doing. So, but it was fun to fight them anyways, and to see like the design process. Here you've got the Lost Tombs of Camutet. Some of the miniatures, the scarabs look amazing. All of these, you know, sphinxes or whatever the hell they are. I mean, look at the giant XL miniature. It's so freaking cool. The mummies are really cool and expressive, and the hero miniatures were pretty solid too. You know, I always wish that the hero miniatures could be a little more heroic. He looks really cool. She looks really cool because she's like holding up the torch, and so that's a little bit of an action pose. You know, like he's just kind of standing there, and she just has the wrench on her shoulder. But they are pretty nice looking miniatures, and I don't have any concerns about the quality of this stuff. Here's some more miniatures, and again, these are all like resin printed, as I understand. They're like prototypes, so they're just like working out the sculpts. All this stuff could change. I'm sure most of it will, but you get a look here at some of the really cool enemies that are coming in some of the expansion packs and whatnot. And that's a really cool. This is a really cool miniature here. That might be the cavalry. I think that's the cavalry officer mounted, which is really cool. And like, look at the detail on like the side back and stuff like that. It's really popping. Here's whatever Scafford, Herman T. Scaffordson, the little mini Scafford, and then the big brutes, and then you've got more skelly bones and pharaoh type stuff. You've got your big Sphinx, very cool. These are, I believe, from the Fury of the Third Reich set, or the Underdark, the Under the Deep set. I'm not entirely sure, the Vampire set. And then as we go along, you can see there the Kraken, and all just, you know, pretty cool sculpts. Here's me hanging out at the bar with my new best friend, Aaron, I believe his name is. I hope I get that right. And the saloon girl, whose name I shall not reveal for fear of y'all stalking her, because she's super cool and was really fun to hang out with. And this guy, so I brought my friend with me this year, and his name is Justin, and he's super into. He was coming more really only for the let's travel the local breweries aspect of Seattle, and so he spent most of the convention hanging out in breweries or in our room watching Colorado football. And so we come downstairs, we sit down, and we're talking with these two, and Aaron reveals that he's actually from Colorado and that he's super pumped. He sees my jacket and he's like, "Go Buffs!" And I'm like, "What? Like go in Washington? Who the hell?" You know. And so we get to talking, and this guy ended up being so cool to hang out with, and so much reminded me so much of my friend Justin who was with me. I mean, they're built very similar and everything. That I started calling him Seattle Justin, at least between me and my friend. And so I miss these guys. We had a lot of fun. I ended up spending a lot of time at the bar just hanging out and talking with them because it was just so engaging, and we were just riffing and having a blast. So. And I drank so much of this freaking root beer. It was ridiculous. I must have drank over a gallon of it. So that was fun. Here's me and Justin. See, there he is. Look at that. They have a similar look. The big beards. I mean, if he had this dope bowler hat, I mean, they'd basically be twins. So, but here we are hanging out at the panel, which was much improved this year over last year. I didn't take any pictures of it because, again, I don't want to step on the frog's feet in terms of showing off preview stuff or putting a ton of pictures of them personally up because I don't know, if they're weirded out by that or whatever. But the panel was light years ahead of where it was last year. And it was one of the critiques I had for DiceFest last year, actually. I did a video very similar to this, and one of the things I slammed them on was, boy, that panel was worthless. They were just, asking people in the crowd, where are you from? And, oh, okay, that's cool. And they just seemed completely unprepared and had nothing to show off. This year they came with a presentation of art from the upcoming sets from the Lost Tombs and the Impossible Hell Train. A lot of it was brand new art that hadn't been seen before, which was very cool. They were talking about their kind of design philosophy for the various enemy sets and whatnot and the expansions. And then it got really awesome because Scott runs off and he comes back with a box that had apparently just arrived, while they were on stage, which contained the first preview, the first sealed sets of all of the heroes that are coming with the second wave of Shadows of Brimstone. I believe it's the second wave anyways. So the Norse Dwarf, the Blood Priestess, the Aztec Jaguar Warrior, I think, the Ulfgard Skin Changer, and actually a production version of the plastic dice Darkstone Shaman. And so they passed the boxes around, which was really cool to actually get to hold them and everything. And then they gave them away because they had basically two sets. They had two of each. So they gave one of each away to the crowd. I did not win one, even with my buddy there. So I had twice the number of people there, which was freaking shame because it would have been really exciting to unbox them on the channel and show something that basically no one else in the world had at that point. But I didn't win them. Congrats to the people who did. I still whooped your ass at pub trivia, so I had that going for me at least. But yeah, it was a really cool panel. And then afterwards they handed out promos, and they had one of the artists from the game come up and do a presentation about his kind of art design philosophy and how he goes about composing shots and whatnot. And he mentioned during the presentation that he worked on a video game called WildStar, which was great because I loved WildStar. I played the shit out of WildStar. It was an MMO with kind of a cowboyish sci-fi slant to it, kind of similar to Brimstone in some ways. It doesn't have like the Lovecraftian horror element, but kind of that same campy like sci-fi western feel to it. And and so he's like, anybody play WildStar? And I was like, hell yeah! He was so pumped. He was so pumped that there was someone there who had actually played WildStar. And he worked on Halo 4 or 5 too, which were both, I thought, really good. At least Halo 4 I really liked. And so, and then he signed prints at the end of it, basically. And so I got a couple of art prints, which I'll frame up with all that other stuff to show off my DiceFest 2023 adventure. So it was really, really cool. And I don't know if the frogs got other feedback about the presentation from last year, or if they saw my feedback and took it to heart. But good on them for really putting on an engaging and exciting presentation this year, and I really enjoyed it. This is the site of the infamous Grumpy Meeple pub trivia slaughter. Me and my buddy sitting right here, getting ready to absolutely annihilate all these poor lost souls who dared challenge us. The pub trivia was really fun. They had a couple of phases, and it was legit pub trivia. The woman who was running it actually runs pub trivia like professionally. I'm not sure, but she runs them across Seattle, and so this was basically, related to it. But as soon as I saw one of the question types, or one of the sections of the pub trivia was just a cross section of candy bars, and like identify the candy bar. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, "You guys are fucking done. No one can stand against me." And just when it comes to identifying candy bars, so that was exciting. And as anticipated, we destroyed them. So very fun. So this would have been on Friday morning or Saturday morning. Friday we spent the morning in a introductory painting class because my friend Justin was interested in trying it to learn how to paint, which he ended up doing really well at. And so we spent a couple hours on that, and then we went out to dinner with my friends that are local to Seattle, and did some other stuff. So that we didn't do any game playing on Friday. But Saturday morning we got up and we started on the Erascov's Portal 3D board. So it's basically a Canyons environment board where an army of Shikari are invading Earth to destroy a cache of Darkstone that is being defended by our intrepid heroes. And they brought this really badass modified Guardian miniature, basically, which was like a robot protector for the Shikari. So it was interesting because the Shikari had a special rule where they wouldn't actually attack us until we attacked them. They were here to destroy the Darkstone. And the way that it was framed was very much that they were kind of the heroes. Like, they're trying to rid the universe of the plague of Darkstone after seeing it destroy their homeworld. And we were trying to protect the Darkstone so we can get paid. So it was kind of like thematically interesting of like, I kind of think we're the bad guys here. And but it was a really fun mission. We totally crushed it, including killing the robot who had 60 hit points before we wiped out the Shikari, which the guy said he hadn't seen done yet. Which was really cool. And I was playing the gunslinger, and there were all sorts of special rules. Every time one of these caches of Darkstone got destroyed, you were allowed to re-enable all of your one-time use cards for an adventure. So like the Marshal badges, we were able to pop those multiple times throughout the experience because basically of a wave of mystical energy that gets released when a Darkstone cache was destroyed. And so real early on, I put a hurtin' on this robot and did something like 18 damage to it in one blast. And we were able to take it down. And so I've got some more pictures of it. All the models were painted up. They all looked great. And just like the detail on the boards, it's all magnetized, so all the minis are magnetized on their bases, and the terrain is magnetic so that it can be moved around and so that it can travel. And I felt like asking the guy. I wanted to interview the person who was designing these boards because he was there and I did have an opportunity, but he was in the middle of setting up and I didn't want to bother him. But man, I would love to know what it would cost to commission one of these boards, because I feel like that would definitely be a once in a lifetime opportunity to have the most like authentic, like immersive gaming experience ever, to walk away with one of this guy's boards and to be able to set it up and show people this is Shadows of Brimstone, and then to be able to really disappoint them when you pull out the flat, cardboard pieces in every other game you play. But man, it was cool, and then everything was painted up beautifully. And there's my buddy Justin. He's playing the saloon girl, and yeah, this is us just like getting ready to crush it. So lots of fun. Made a couple friends while we were there, which was really cool. And we ran into them a couple more times during the show, and had a great time hanging out and chatting with them. And that's kind of what DiceFest is all about. So here you go. They reached some havoc at some point and took a couple of it was a piece of dynamite actually that one of our characters threw, and it blew up and killed like two of our own guys. But they were able to get back up, and we were able to finish them off. So successful completion of the mission. And one thing I realized too is that I think this is a deliberate design decision. The board is built in a giant wooden frame. And as I was looking at it, I realized that there's probably a topper for this that just, snaps down onto it to protect it and to transport it. And if that's the case, then that's just like another really cool design decision. And man, I wish I had one of these boards. They are amazing. So here are some preview shots from the Lost Tombs of Kamuntet. So I was able to get into a demo version of both this and the Impossible Hell Train. I was playing as the Soldier of Fortune. And we had 4 players with us, obviously. And so this stuff was all prototype, and they asked that we not photograph anything that was like obviously prototypey or anything that had like card kind of text on it, so that we weren't setting expectations, because it's all still very much in design. But I got some shots of the miniatures and a few of the terrain tiles, and the mission itself was really fun. The Soldier of Fortune's pretty fun. He comes with his brace of 45s, which he can fire either two-handed or single-handed. And I want to say every time he gets a hit with one, it counts as 2 hits, which opens up the opportunity for him to just slam damage out. And the Professor was really cool. He had a whole deck of kind of specialties or something along those lines that he could have that would essentially function as spells for him. The mechanic was a beast. I think her strength was 5. It was like one of the highest stats I've ever seen. So she was really helpful when we got stuck in a trap, which definitely happened. And then you have the Explorer, who was pretty cool as well. So just a couple shots of the in-progress miniatures. Here we are trying to save ourselves from the closing rooms trap, which was cool. I heard some concerns about it maybe kind of... people are worried that it's going to be janky to play and maybe like really slow down the experience. And I can't speak to that. I can say I could see it being kind of finicky, because you're running around in this particular trap with this particular solution. You're running around placing these scavenge tokens, and so you end up spending quite a bit of time in here because you can only place so many each turn, and it was pretty easy to game as well, because the whole idea is that there's a plate here. The last open space you have that hasn't been scavenged is the pressure plate basically, and once you find it, then you're doing a test against strength or whatever stat to hold back, to stop the trap basically. And so the idea is you want to make sure that that's centered on the board so that it doesn't get covered by the walls, because if it does, then it's basically game over. And there were a couple of mechanics like this where it almost seemed like the frogs were trying to find ways to kind of speed up gameplay or to introduce like legit game ending threats, you know? So in the Lost Tomb, that could like party wipe you. So in the Lost Tombs, it was these traps because you can't escape from the room because it's sealed off. And so you got to deal with this. You got to deal with this fucking trap and get through it or you're dead. And in the Impossible Hell Train, there was a mechanic of actually being able to be like kicked off of the train entirely if you're on the top level. And in both cases, I got the sense that they were looking to change things up in terms of maybe the speed and flow of gameplay, basically. And so it's very cool. I had a lot of fun with this particular trap. I could see it getting a little finicky. It does add a lot of cards and a lot of rules to the game. But I could also see it being really cool. And so they're still working on it, and I'm sure that they're aware that, you know, we need to make sure that this doesn't become too onerous, you know, in terms of just like running it, because you have like these tokens that you're laying out that are for the board, and I worry about some of that too because it just might look janky. You know, you want a polished experience, and that's hard to get when you need these closing wall tiles essentially that need to fit every tile in a game in which the tiles are wildly different in terms of size, and where like some of them have rounded edges. How is that going to work? I don't know. So, you know, I look forward to seeing what they come up with on that. But it was cool, and it was memorable and different, and a good time was had by all. Here's some more close up pictures of some of the guys. There's the mummies. Sorry, some of these are like not the greatest pictures in the world. There's the rail worker. So I ended up playing as this character in the Impossible Hell Train, and he was really cool. He came with this gigantic rail spike hammer, and it only rolled one die. It rolled a d8 for hit, I want to say, and 2d6 for damage. And it only had one shot. So it's kind of like the Redemptionist shotgun in that it's like your big bang, one hit, like high damage on a single target type weapon. But the thing that was really interesting about him was that he was a legit tank, like a World of Warcraft tank, in the sense that he had mechanics that were specifically forcing enemies that are adjacent to him. If you chose the Protector track in terms of your starting upgrades, which I did, it forced any enemy that was adjacent to him to target him. And I just thought that was really cool because that's a little bit unique, I feel like, in the sets. I don't know that I've seen that before, where you would really call out the fact that, yo, that's a tank. You know, like you have tankier characters like the sumo who just have like a ton of health, but they don't really have any like threat management, whereas this was very much like, yo, threat management. This is your cooldown, essentially, you know, that you would pop in World of Warcraft. And I thought it was really cool, and I'm really looking forward to playing as that character some more. And in all of the heroes from these two expansions were pretty cool. The cavalry soldier was really cool. He had the ability to wield a ranged and melee weapon at the same time and to use them both in an attack, which was very cool. And he had this really cool mechanic where he could kind of charge in and then fall back all within a round, so he could like kind of push past me, do an attack, and then come back behind me so that he wouldn't get targeted. And the Railworker's ability was so powerful, and because of the nature of the tiles, because there should be there's a couple more pictures of minis. That's the reporter. And there's the bounty hunter, who was also very cool. I'm not sure what happened here. I'm not sure why all of a sudden my photos went from looking like total shit to looking great, but that's what they actually look like. I don't know what's going on. I'm really doing the frogs dirty with these pictures. Forget about those freaking pictures. Those are horrible. Here you go. Yes, much nicer, much better picture. So because of the nature of the tiles, though, they're all shaped like rail cars. And so I asked him at one point, you've got this tanky character who could basically post up and not be bypassed. Do you worry at all about the kind of hero quest problem, where you have the warrior stand in the doorway and nobody can get past him, and so you're always able to control the flow of enemies and to protect your weaker characters? And he said that, yeah, they had thought about that, and that was why some of the characters, particularly the main zombies for this set, the kind of soul corrupted ones with the stuff coming out of their mouths, they have an ability that's actually like an AoE on a successful attack, and that's specifically so that they can hit people that are like behind him and discourage that kind of blocking doorway gameplay. So I thought that was really cool too, and a really cool insight, and just so fun to actually be able to talk to Jason Hill and ask him a few questions. Every time I go to DiceFest, I ping their social, their kind of, Facebook group messenger, and just say, hey, is there any way I could get time to talk to the frogs about game design and whatnot? I love the game, and I'm trying to evangelize for it as much as people want to give me shit for the 2 goddamn videos I made where I critiqued them out of the literally 40, 50 videos I have on Shadows of Brimstone, probably as much as anyone on the internet at this point, really. But, I love the game, and I'd love to talk to them about the design and whatnot, and bounce some questions off of them, and they're just always too busy, and I get it. I mean, they're trying to run this convention, and so it was just really nice to be able to actually bounce a few kind of intelligent questions off of the designer, and to have him respond. So that was really fun. But while we're on the topic of like how much work it is to run this convention and everything, I did get a much better sense, not just of the convention kind of the weight of the convention on them, but just the company in general. I guess I just didn't have a very clear understanding of just how bootstrapped and small they are. But, as an example, everyone that was working the convention was voluntary, as far as I know. They were all volunteering their time, just because they're like friends with the frogs, basically. And, at one point I was in the store and I was buying a bunch of these thermal plastic miniatures, and I mentioned to them, the people at the front desk or at the checkout, that I was going to put them all into this box. And it was so cute, and it really like outlined where they're at in terms of the size of the company, because they said to me, oh, well, if you're going to do that, we'll take those clamshells back if you don't need them. Like it's, we can reuse them for another product later on. And I just thought that was like so bootstrappy to me, of like, hey man, that stuff costs money if you're not going to use it, And I was happy to do so. I pulled everything out and put it into the goodie box that I was transporting things in. And that was just a really good example of why these guys do deserve some grace, in terms of, this is just like 2 brothers, and mostly their relatives, from what I could tell. Everybody was somebody's cousin or uncle or married to one of the cousins, with few exceptions, or a kid of somebody who was married to one of the cousins. And so you really got the sense that this really is like a small independent, game publisher, basically. And just because they make millions of dollars on their Kickstarters, it really doesn't change that, because they're putting that money into the games, and they're consistently delivering the games, whether it takes 5 years or not. It's another question. It's never bothered me. I don't care about the timing. Because I have too much of this stuff to ever reasonably play in a lifetime as it is. But that was just a really fun way of getting some insight into just how bootstrapped these guys are. And so if you're slamming them about shipping times or communication on the Kickstarter, which they're admittedly terrible with, and which again kind of doesn't surprise me. It's kind of, they feel to me a little bit like software developers, where that just ain't their strong suit. Like, it's just not. They don't have that. They don't have this thing necessarily of like being like openly affable and really wanting to spend their time like talking and communicating with people, because they're so busy like trying to get this game together. So just bear that in mind, and I intend to bear it in mind too, in the future, in terms of my coverage. Like, nobody gets a free pass from me. I will destroy anyone for anything if I think it's truly fucked up. But it's just something to bear in mind. They really are small. This is not CMON. Like, CMON gets got because they are making $10 million per Kickstarter. They're like a publicly traded company. These guys are like essentially doing this out of their basements. They're like a step above doing this out of their basements, is the sense that I got. So what they've accomplished given that is incredible. So moving on, these are the mounted bandit miniatures. These are some of the coolest miniatures that I saw at the whole convention. Again, they're resin and they're very much work in progress, but they're really cool looking. They're really big and chunky, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them in action. And here's some pictures of them. Another thing that I'll note about the Impossible Hell Train was it was really cool because each car train has its own like car train rule set. So kind of like, I don't know what I would compare it to, like the passage encounters in the Belly of the Beast maybe. But basically, when you land on a car train, it has a card that's associated to it that goes a step further than like the advanced encounters, so where it's literally like tied to the board. Some of those are mostly thematic, but this was just a little bit deeper, where it was like if you're in one of these kind of sleeping chambers on the car, when you scavenge, you can get 2 pieces of loot per successful scavenge or something like that. It was just really cool, really thematic, and differentiating it from the other sets, which is very cool. Moving on. These are the enemies that we were facing. I wish I could remember the name of them, but as you can see, the miniatures were pretty dope. They were impossibly strong. Please, for the love of God, make them weaker. And I got to talk again with Jason Hill about like how they might go about doing that. Do they decrease it to just a terror 1, so they're only doing 1 terror? Do they decrease it so that they can only heal 1 hit point per round instead of like literally they could heal 10? Like I slammed one of these guys for like 6 damage and he was all healed up by the next time I got around to him. So they definitely need some design tweaking, but that's what playtesting is for, and that's what things like DiceFest are for, to get people to play it and then to point out, hey man, don't forget, normal people need to be able to kill this, not like designers of the game. This is a picture from the rock concert, which was pretty awesome, actually. You had Scott Hill. He was on the guitar, and he was drinking what I will call a suspicious beverage that he multiple times referred to as tea, but he also slipped in that it's definitely not vodka. So, which was fun because we were sitting there, me and my buddy, slamming root beer with a local bourbon whiskey mixed into it. That was how we were getting our jollies. And so he was, at one point he called out to the convention. He was like, hey, is anybody hit the bar before this? Anybody get some drinks? And the entire crowd was completely silent. And he was like, oh boy, okay, well, this will be fun. And me and my buddy were just like, yeah, we're getting at it. Don't worry about it. So that was fun. And they sang a bunch of 80s songs and did some songs from like Last Night on Earth and Fortune and Glory, I think. And just just really fun, and like a pretty good like pub band. I was actually impressed, and I'm even more impressed now that I've gone on YouTube. If you go into the Facebook channel for the unofficial Flying Frog, I found some videos of these guys like 20 years ago covering like They Might Be Giants and whatnot, and it's really funny to see them like back then before this game was ever even probably a glimmer in their eye, basically, rocking out to nerd music and looking so much younger and less less harried by the ills of dealing with the public as it relates to complaining about the shipping time for their Kickstarters. And the Saloon Girl got in on the action too and sang a couple songs, and she was quite talented. So fun time. Oh, okay. I think that's actually it. So we will end it on that. I hope that gave some insight into what was going on at DiceFest, what was going on in terms of game design for the new releases. And, keep an eye on the channel. I still have more DiceFest related stuff coming and more Shadows of Brimstone stuff. The channel is becoming almost a Shadows of Brimstone channel at this point, which I've toyed with the idea of kind of transitioning in that direction in the past and may well end up doing, because the stuff is getting looked at least and viewed, and people seem to enjoy it, and it really is like by far my favorite game and the game I'm most heavily invested in, so maybe it makes sense to just focus on it. So hope you enjoyed it, and I will talk to you later.